Okay, good evening. This is our last minute video for first time opt out parents. We can cover some questions that have been asked in the group and just talk a little bit about these things. I'd really been ambitious and intended to have a PowerPoint for you guys, but I got to tell you, it's been a bad day in a lot of regards, and I just figure with STAAR coming up in a week, I'm just going to go ahead and ad lib this and talk you through it, and we're going to just go from there. So let's take some questions. I'm going to start with what I call the notice questions, and those are questions about um, you know the telling the school and what they say and what you say back and things like that. I'll start with this on the TextEd Rights website. That's txedrights.net. We have the step-by-step guide, which will sort of walk you through the expected responses and whatnot. So please read that. That's going to be your best guide. But question number one: is it too late to opt out? The answer to that question is no. It's not too late to opt out until your kid actually sits down and takes a STAAR. If you wanted to, you could opt out on the very day of the STAAR. We get a similar question, uh, which we'll jump to. Do you have to tell the school you're opting out? Can't we just tab through and be done? Absolutely. You do not have to tell the school. You could just have your student go in and turn in a blank assessment. You're done. You've opted out. Uh, the reason we ask people to send the letters is twofold. Number one, if there is a statutory right to opt out, which the state denies, and we say there is, no court's ever decided, it's kind of irrelevant because at the end of the day, you're either going to opt out or you're not. It's not asking for permission, it's you exercising your right. As a parent, you either have a statutory right or you're engaging in a little civil disobedience, but no one's going to jail, so you're all right. Uh, but the reason that we ask people to give notice is so that schools and teachers and the TEA understand that there's an undercurrent of parents who are refusing to comply with the system as it is, and that we want change. And these are things that are important. They are a way that we inform people. They're a way that we make our points. They're a way that we ask other people to get on board with us in this cause. But do you have to? No, you don't have to. We obviously want you to because you know we're proud of what we do. We think you should be too. And the only other thing I would say, and I'm just saying this because it's going to sound crazy, but things crazier than this happen every day, and that is this. If you opt out without notice, your student is in the exact same situation as if you opt out with notice. They've gone through, they've tabbed through. The score sheet's going to be submitted. It's going to come back with a raw score of 0, which is not your score. It's going to generate the minimum scaled score. So your kid's not going to make a 0. He's going to make 750, 850, 950. It's meaningless numbers. It's all on a scale. Uh, and it's going to show in the summary that no questions were gotten right. Now, if you've sent your opt out letter, there's at least a record of why that is. Now, I can't for the life of me think that any school is going to actually think that a 0 raw score was generated by lack of knowledge. That would take a tremendous amount of luck to either get everything wrong or, even guessing, get everything wrong. So I can't imagine a school would actually think that. But it might make clear why it happened because there are schools, and we see this every now and then, where they talk about the effort of the student or they want to blame the student for not really giving their best. I think there is a real chance a school might think that a student just decided, I'm not going to do this, rather than this being a decision that the family or the parent has made. So I think there is that positive when you give the opt out notice instead of or in addition to making your statement as to why you're doing this. You're making it clear that it's you, it's not your kid, and so don't label my kid, don't accuse him of this. This is you. And so I do think there's a slight benefit there. Um, Another question we've seen a lot in the notice areas is this: I sent my opt out letter, but the school didn't respond. And the next question is either what do I do, or I guess this means everything's okay. Uh, and I think those questions are both kind of tied up together. Number one, I don't assume that everything's okay. I don't assume everything's okay, even if the school says, yes, we've got your letter, we'll respect you. I assume that unless I know otherwise and have a history of dealing with the school, that they are going to attempt to assess the child. And whether it's with a nod or a wink or overt pressure, that when that child is in the assessment room, they're going to be telling them, "Oh, you can do this. It's okay. You come on, show us how much you've learned. Show us how you use your strategies. Oh, you've done so good. You're going to pass this easy. You know, whether it's something innocent like that or whether it's a more overt thing like, oh no, your mom called 5 minutes ago and said you're supposed to take this now. And go ahead, get started. All of which has happened. All of which has happened. Uh, and really happens every year. It's not even a good strategy. We should all know that particular scheme that your mom called. Uh, so so what do? You sent a letter and the school didn't respond. So what do you do? Well, I think it's twofold. Number one, first and foremost, you make your opt out plan because again, you're not asking the school for permission. Your decision to opt out is not dependent upon their particular agreement with you. You make your plan of how you're going to opt out. Um, are you going to keep your kid home on the main administration day? Are you going to tab through on the main day? Are you going to tab through on the second day? Or are you going to try and be out for the entire STAAR administration, which is difficult because of the long testing windows? Uh, you make that plan. That's number one, because then regardless of what the school says or does, you have a plan that's going to enable you to opt out. Again, remember, you don't need the school's permission and you don't need their cooperation to opt out, because at the end of the day, if your student goes in there, hits the arrow to the last page of the assessment and hits submit, they've opted out. They're done. There's nothing more. As long as they're not filling in the answers as they go along, you've had a successful opt out. But that being said, what you want to do is you want to figure out what is the opt out going to look like. And so while I think generally we try and say, look, don't have these in person discussions because they really just turn the school trying to pressure you or make threats and all that. I mean, look, if you've read the materials and you know at the end of the day it's all hollow. So, if you can stand up to it, fine. We like to have stuff in writing because what happens is they'll say things that they'll never put in writing. And if you have a meeting and they say something outrageous, you send an email back and says, at our meeting today, you said X, Y, to Z, that if little Johnny doesn't take the STAAR, he's going to fail third grade and have to go to summer school and no recess next year. Did I understand you correctly? No, you'll send that and they'll either absolutely refuse to respond to it, or they'll go, that is not what I said at all, and it's exactly what they said. So there's a reason why we like to do things in writing, because they're a little more circumspect. In a face-to-face meeting, things come out of their mouth that just it never ceases to shock me. But if they're ignoring you and you don't have anything better to do, if you want to go and meet face to face, the question is this: okay, simply, okay, we're not going to participate in STAAR. My son's going to turn in a blank assessment, and then try and figure out what that's going to look like. Obviously, the strategy that we want, and this ties into the second one, which is my school sent a letter saying I can't opt out. What do I do? Sorry, third question. My school sent me a letter saying I can't opt out. What do I do? Well, that's really easy. You opt out. Again, we're not asking for permission. We don't need their permission. If you've done your research, you already know. Of course, that's what the school's going to say. That's what the TA tells them they have to say. Um, you know, what's really funny is there's letters now, form letters that go around and go, you cannot opt out. It's mandatory in Texas. Here are your three choices. You take the assessment, you're absent for the entire time, or you're present but refuse to take the assessment. I'm like, well, back up to that last one. That sounds pretty good to me. That's what we call opting out. Thanks. Um, so, uh, if you've read our materials on refusals, parental refusals, the TEA has told the schools that they can accept a parental refusal and they don't have to put the assessment in front of the kid. They can just, receive the documentation of the parental refusal, submit the assessment for scoring. Kid never has to see it, doesn't have to sit in a room for 4 hours, doesn't have to, tab through manually and hit submit at the end. They've met their obligation to provide him a testing opportunity, but the parent has refused it. This is the ideal situation. This is what we want the opt-out to look like. And so that's usually where I would start in a discussion, whether it's written or oral with the school, about let's talk about what this is going to look like. We would like you to use the authority that you have to accept this parental refusal and submit the assessment and not put it in front of my child. He can stay in the office, he can go to another grade level, he can, whatever. And you'll hear, we can't make those accommodations during STAAR days. Okay, so then the conversation shifts. Well, if I understand that, it's certainly a very busy time. If we keep him home on the main administration and bring him to school the next day, will you just submit it based on the refusal and he'll go back to class? And a lot of schools have started to say yes to that. It's just theater to put him in a room and make him tab through. So that's what we're aiming for. But what you may end up with is no, every student must go into the assessment room and hear the instructions and manually submit the assessment. Well, number one, student can always not touch it. It's still going to be submitted for them. So they might be sitting there for a long time, or they can go to the end and hit submit without answering it. The idea, though, is you want to have the best idea of what's going to happen so you can prepare your child. You also need to prepare them for the potential, misrepresentation about, oh, your mother said it was fine to take it. I just talked to her. That's the password system. Have a password with your child. If they can't give him the password, he doesn't take it. And just tell them, there have been schools that have tried to trick kids by telling them their mother said it was okay. So here's a password. If they don't know it, you don't take it. It's just they're not being honest with you. So there's lots of things that you can do to prepare yourself. But the whole idea, whether it's the school saying you can't opt out or the school ignoring you, the whole idea is to try and figure out what that assessment day is going to look like for your child, because you've already made the decision to opt out. It will happen. They can't stop you. The only thing that can stop you is yourself. Either you give in or you don't prepare your child adequately, or not any of the child's fault, but they might get pressured and cave in. And that's why the preparation is so important. That's why it's so important that the child understand how to do it. And that's also why we should be lobbying and talking and speaking about the idea of accepting the refusal and just submitting the assessment, because when that happens, there really isn't that same risk. But have a plan. Particularly have a plan for the idea of your child being pulled to take the assessment. This happens every single year. Parents absent on the main assessment day, goes back the next day, and cannot believe that the school, which had their opt-out letter and acknowledged it, pulled their child for the STAAR, and the child took the STAAR. Happens every year. And that's just not being prepared. Got to have a plan. On that next day, you walk your kid in, and you walk into the office and you say, hey, we've refused the STAARs. He going to class? Yes or no. So then you can talk to your child and tell them what's happening. You can confirm that it's been submitted. But again, have a backup plan. Because what if they're just, committed to being dishonest with you? Oh, yeah, he goes right back to class. We've already submitted it. And then as soon as he's in class and you're gone, they pull him and go, you have to take the STAAR. And what does your child do? Well, first thing you better do is, if he has a phone, pull it out and you text 911 to you, not to 911. And you turn around and you come get the kid, right? You just have to be prepared. There are stories after stories in the group of different things that can happen. And we could talk about them over and over, but that's why having this conversation up front with the school, whether it's oral or in writing, to figure out what that day is going to look like, and how your kid is going to be expected to respond on that day. That's the most important thing that you can do. And that's true again, whether they ignore you, whether they acknowledge your opt out and go, yes, we've got it, it's in our file, or whether they are all you can't opt out, that's not allowed. Whatever it is, the best thing that you can do is have yourself in a position where you are able to have an idea of what the day is going to look like, because that's how the child's going to be in the best position to respond and be successful with the opt-out, right? All right, what's some more questions that we have here? Oh, can my student be retained for not taking STAAR or quote-unquote failing it? Okay, I'm going to say the answer to that question is no, with an asterisk. And here's the thing. All of the laws that used to require STAAR passage for promotion in 5th and 8th grade, which never actually required it, but it was part of the law, those were repealed. That doesn't exist anymore. In fact, the TEA put out a big flyer last year. I don't know if they're still sending around this year, boasting about the fact that there's no promotion or no retention on STAAR, that this is low stakes for students. So for 99.9% of you, the answer to that question is no. If your kid's in Nazareth ISD, the question is, I don't know. Because Nazareth ISD, by the way, in what I believe to be a deliberate effort to intimidate a opt-out parent, passed their own local board policy that says if you don't pass STAAR, you have to go to a promotion committee, and it is a less robust process than even what existed under the previous law. I'd like at some point to dig into the numbers and see what they're actually doing to themselves. It's a very small district, but they've actually put a board policy in place. Are they allowed to do that? I honestly don't know. I mean, on the one hand, there's a pretty good argument that the state has made a policy decision that this is not part of the assessment system. And the TEA is promoting to parents everywhere that it's not part of the assessment system. Should an ISD be able to legislate within that and create a higher or different standard? I don't know. I mean, possibly yes, but the thing is that's one small district out of 1,000 or whatever there are in the state. So can your student be retained? If they're not in Nazareth ISD, the answer is almost certainly no. Does my student have to partake in extra tutoring or summer school for not taking / failing STAAR? Okay, so when you don't take STAAR, and this is true whether you're absent or whether you tab through and submit a blank assessment, you will not have met the standards of approaching grade level on STAAR, either because you were absent or because you turned in a blank assessment that received the minimum scaled score. That means that the law says the district's required to provide you accelerated instruction, which could be in the summer, it could be during the school year. So that same law, though, says that parents have a right to opt out of that accelerated instruction. There's one caveat here. If you're actually absent You don't have that right until your kid takes a beginning of the year screening assessment, um, which a school I don't know that school is actually required to give it to you, and that's the hardest thing about this. So that's one of the reasons, apart from the practicalities of how long the assessment windows are, that's one of the reasons we say it's much better if you can refuse by turning in a blank assessment or having the school accept your refusal, because then you will get a score report that says you attempted to STAAR but did not meet the standards. And that means you have the right under the statute to opt out without any other screening assessments. Um, so the answer is the school is required to offer it. If you if you are a refusal, tab through, whatever you want to call it, you can opt out of that. If you are absent for the entire assessment window and you get a score report that says absent, um, then you would have to take a beginning of the year screener before you could opt out, but you'd still have that right once you take the beginning of the year screener, right? What does my kid do if they lie to them or still pressure them to complete the assessment? Well, there's lots of answers to that. You need to prepare your kid for that possibility. Like I said, password system. For the idea that your parents just called and said they want you to take it. The key to this is to let the student know that the faster they get to the end and hit submit, the sooner it's over. Because once they hit submit, there's nothing they can do about it. There's nothing they can do about it. What can they do? They could put their head down. They could close the laptop if they're using a laptop. They could say, call my mother. We used to have cards that we would give the student, and these are still in the group somewhere, that basically say, I'm sorry, I'm not allowed to participate in this. If you have an issue, call my mother. I don't want to be in the middle of this. The more things you arm your student with, the better. Um, so, putting your head down, closing the laptop, handing him a card, asking for the password, and then obviously my mom says without the password I can't take it. The more you honor, the more weapons you give them, the more likely you are to withstand a pressure. And it's sad that we have to do this. It's sad that we have to talk about it, but we do. But we do. Um, and just I think if your child understands injustice and you talk to them a little bit about some of the really bad things about STAAR and how it is unjust and how it hurts other kids, and how by refusing we are not putting our data into that system. I mean, if we're skewing everything lower, so they either have to throw our data out or they have to lower all the standards for everyone else. And if I had to guess, I think they really just throw the data out. But if you can talk to your kid about the why, so that they're bought in on that too, and that might strengthen them a little bit. Obviously, the older the kid is, the better chance they're able to stand up to it. So yeah, I mean, I think that's the best that they can do. If they can try and get to the bathroom and use their phone, if they haven't, secret phone, I don't know, just anything, to get some help. We have parents that on the main assessment day they'll go and try and pick the kid up 30 minutes after it starts, on the premise that that's plenty of time to tab through, right? So just work with your kid, and and look, I would talk to the school also and be very blunt. We've heard a lot about teachers or proctors trying to pressure opt-out kids to take it. I need to know that's not going to happen. I need your word. Maybe they'll even tell you who the proctor is, and you can talk to that person. And maybe you can have that conversation with your kid present there too. Just something to strengthen him a little bit. Um, what are some other questions? If I keep them home on assessment day, will it be excused? Probably not. A school district has the authority to excuse it, but most of them don't. You know, and they also, by the way, they don't have to excuse doctor notes, they appointments, things like that. That's not a statutory excused absence. That's a district policy. So I know a lot of parents will make appointments for that main assessment day, and maybe they'll excuse it. Again, they don't have to, and if they don't, what can you really say? Um, but you know, again, if you're able to refuse in person, um, that takes away that issue of attendance, right? Because that was another question. How does it affect their attendance? Well, if you go in on the first day and you submit a blank assessment, you haven't missed any school, so it doesn't affect your attendance. We have the potential for 3-week assessment windows. And some schools will use every day, but some won't. Some will have 1 day, 2 days of assessment, and that's it. And you could probably be out for those. But others will use the whole assessment window. And if you don't know which one your district is, and they don't have to tell you, by the way, if you don't know which one your district is, you really could run a chance of truancy, and you don't want that. So that's why the active refusal is a much, much better option as the TEA stretches these assessment windows further and further out. Um, I don't have in front of me all the details on the truancy laws or the 90% rule and how that calculates out through STAAR. You're just gonna have to watch it. You're going to be very careful because those days can definitely add up, and you don't want to be in a truancy situation. Um, Last question. I liked this one. There was a question. Do you have to substitute an assessment at the high school level? And the answer is that completely depends on what your graduation plan is. Okay. Um, Substitute assessments are one way to graduate without taking STAAR. Um, and if that's your plan, and it's open to everybody, so that's a lot of people choose that. If that's your plan, then yes, you have to substitute the assessment. If your student is under the special ed umbrella, they can graduate by ARD without taking STAAR or without ever you have to attempt it, but you don't have to take it. You just have to turn the bank assessment. You don't have to pass it, and you don't have to pass a substitute assessment. Your ARD committee can graduate you. So in that case, no, you don't have to substitute assessments. Um, IGC committee could be sort of a hybrid where you might substitute 3 assessments and not substitute the other 2 and use project or portfolio for those 2. And then my personal favorite, the CVET program, which you basically get your credits at school and you pay $500 for a private school accredited diploma. Um, so then you don't have to pass anything, you don't have to substitute anything, you don't have to do any projects. That's a pretty good deal to me. Um, so again, it just depends. We've got articles on high school issues on text ed rights. Read them. It'll walk you through the different graduation plans that exist. Um, and all these articles I'm referring to are linked in the featured posts of the Facebook group. Last question: how early can you submit substitute scores? For example, can you use a PSAT score for a subject given in 10th, but the student is in 9th? Uh, the school cannot accept your substitute assessment until the student is enrolled in or have completed the class. So if, for instance, you've taken the PSAT, you've scored enough for English 2, well enough for English 2, but you're in 9th grade in English 1, you cannot submit that substitute assessment score for your English 2. You have to wait till the student's actually enrolled in English 2, at which point the school should accept and confirm that they've met their graduation requirement via substitute assessment. Okay, well, let's see. How long did we go? Yeah, 30 minutes. All right, not bad. Okay, well, that's all I've got for you tonight. If you got more questions, stick them in the comments. All right, thanks, guys. Bye.